morning, everyone. Morning. Again, today's really a beautiful day, and welcome to our webinar as we will continue, continue learning and looking at the JET Analytics tool. Before I begin, again, I would just like to say on behalf of Managing Director, Mr. Hector Negron, I want to say thank you all for participating in our webinars, and in particular today's webinar, JET Analytics. We know that your time is precious and you could have been spending it elsewhere, but you chose to be with us, and for that we're truly thankful. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen. As usual, every time when I do my webinars, I always say, or I always preface this comment before I begin. I'm going to say we're going to have fun. It is my role to make sure that you enjoy all presentations. So even though to one extent it might seem like we're moving now into a lot of technical areas, my role is to break it down so that it's as simple as possible. So before I begin, again, let me just say thank you. And I just shared my screen. Can I just get a confirmation that you're both hearing me and you're seeing my screen?
Yeah, we are seeing your screen and hearing very clear, Steve.
Beautiful. So let's have some fun. Okay, so remember when we spoke about the JET Analytics tool, just as by way of a quick 1-minute summary, we spoke about it within the context of you using a tool that is able to give you, by and large, visual data, visualized data. We know the acronym or the adage which says a picture speaks 1,000 words. Well, we're hoping that with this tool, your pictures will actually, or your visuals will actually say more than 1,000 words. And what we started yesterday or last week rather, is that we looked at the context of how the JET Analytics tool operates, and the fact that you're able to bring so many different bits of data, not only within your operational databases, but maybe also you being able to integrate your data with maybe industry-wide statistics, and therefore by you incorporating industry-wide data, you're probably able to do some benchmarking. So therefore you're able to position your data against what is happening in the industry. Or even more importantly, you might even be able to extend the scope of your analysis to even include a wider environment, not just your industry. And we had concluded by saying that one of the benefits of the tool is, as long as you're able to connect to the data sources of these additional data, that you can therefore bring into your model. So, I'm now going to be introducing some terminologies going forward, which are more in line with the verbiage of business intelligence, because really this is what the JET Analytics tool facilitates. It facilitates business intelligence. So with you being able to bring all this data together, you are able to organize your data into what is called maybe data marts, where a data mart is a subset of your entire data set. So your model would include a lot of data marts, which therefore break down your overall data into different subsets, which concentrate on specific areas, as you may have specific users who only need access to specific data. For example, your sales team might be interested in data relating to warehouse inventory and also sales activity and sales performance. They may not necessarily be interested in data relating to purchases or maybe the overall finances of the organization. So therefore, with you being able within this entire data set within your data model, you're able to break it down further into smaller data marts, and where you are able to create subsets of your data so that you can assign or make this subset of data be only usable by a certain user group within your organization. So, and we had said that we're going to literally dive in come the next class, which is today, or the next webinar, which is today. But before we do that, I really believe that there are two slides from the last presentation, which I think we need to look at. This first slide, just to review again, what this first slide really does is to highlight the objective of using the JET analytics tool, which is basically optimizing business intelligence. So starting on the left, we're saying here that in you moving to business intelligence, the first thing you have to recognize that you have to identify some data source from which you're able to get your raw data. So that's really what this first image here is saying. So here you're seeing a database which has tables connected in so many different data sources, your internal production databases. You also have databases relating to other aspects of your organization. I remember giving an example of access control systems. So if you're able to see persons clocking in and clocking out, are you able to tie their movement within the organization with the level of productivity or the level of non-productivity within the organization? So it is highlighted here by the icon where you're just seeing data, these icons, the reds, the greens, etc., just all over the place. And once you're able to identify your data sources, the next step is that you now begin to use along a continuum, what is known as your ETL. So again, we're now introducing terminologies which are more familiar within the business and intelligence realm. And what does ETL mean? ETL means extraction, transformation, and loading. So as you move into business intelligence, there is some measure of extraction, and these terms are important because it's going to lay the foundation now as we move into JET. And as you are therefore extracting, once you have now your data sources, you can now move into what is called transformation, in that you expect that because you're getting your data from so many different sources, you must expect that one, there might be some measure of data cleansing, because you might be able to get some public data, for example, that is available on the internet. But how reliable is this public data? You might have to go through the data and look at extreme values, for example. Maybe you might need to apply some measure of statistics to see if there is data that probably varies from what is called the distribution mean. So you would expect that data cleansing would be part of now the transformation process. Also data selection, because whether the data comes from within your organization or if the data is from many different disparate sources, whether in the organization or outside the organizational environment, there is an expectation that some of the records might be redundant to the extent that it may not be necessary for what you want to accomplish as you move towards business intelligence. So there's an expectation that your data selection methodology is going to be also important as you move to transform your data. So we have the ETL, the extraction, the transformation, and now we have L, which stands for loading. And the loading is just as important. You may remember just a few minutes before I would have said that now that you have this data warehouse with all your data inside your database, there's a possibility that some of the data might only be relevant to specific persons within the organization. So what you try to do is to create what is called data marts. And these data marts are usually represented by what is called a cube. So a cube gives, is like a data mart with all your data that is necessary for the analysis that you'd like to undertake. So for instance, you might create a cube that represents relevant data for sales. So therefore you would not find tables or measures or data related to areas of production or productivity or operations, but mostly information relating to sales orders and where the sales take place. So therefore, from you are able to create a cube with your data and measure for sales, for example, you would now just have a subset of your overall database, which would be a data mart represented by the cube. And why do you have cubes, as we said? You only want to put together and package into a cube only the records which are necessary for the persons who use it. So therefore, it makes your data accessing more efficient for the individuals, and they don't have to be waiting hours because you have to be sifting through so many reports. Also, once you have established a cube, you are able now to look at the cubed data from many different perspectives. And if you look again at this third image, you'll notice now the data seems to be in some order which looks like some kind of a cube. You may remember, for those of you who may remember, the Rubik's Cube. And what this allows you to do is that it allows you to do what is called a dimensional, or to apply what is called a dimensional perspective. So therefore, a dimension provides an analysis from different angles. So you may have sales data, but the very sales data, which might be aggregated, can be viewed from the perspective of the customer. So you're able to analyze your data to see who are your top 10 selling customers. You're also able to take that data that is in your cube and probably analyze it based on region. So from that, you're able to determine what region, or to which region or regions are you selling most or not selling most. You're also able to probably analyze the same sales data by salesperson. So therefore, the very same data that is in the cube with its measure, where the measure would be the aggregation of your sales data. So in here I've now introduced another terminology called measure. So now that you have added a measure, which is to aggregate your sales data, you can now apply a dimension against the cube, where the dimension is a perspective. So therefore, one of the perspectives could be the salesperson, as we said, or the sales region. Good. So these are the terminologies that we will see as we move into areas like the cubes. So now that we understand that we move from raw data to optimized data in order to finally move to business intelligence, the question is, how does the JET Analytics tool do this? In our last webinar, what we showed in this screen is really the same acronym, ETL, extraction, transformation, and loading, and how all of this will be done using the JET Analytics tool, and in particular, the tool called the JET Data Manager. So this diagram is very simple for us to flow and understand. So if you look here, we start first with our various databases. The tool is made or designed more specifically for the Dynamics products, meaning the Dynamics Business Central 365, or Dynamics GP, or Dynamics for finance and operations. But as long as you have any other SQL or other types of ODBC databases, the acronym for ODBC, Object Database Connectivity, which is just a fancy name for a connection protocol, which allows one system to be able to communicate with another system and to share data across both systems. So we're saying here, based on the diagram, that if you look at all these databases here on the left, which represents the various databases that will be the source of your data, then what brings them together is a tool called the JET Data Manager. So that's the first responsibility of the JET Data Manager. It brings all the various data sources together. And then from you are able to identify the data sources using the JET Data Manager, you can now move to the next stage, which is the extraction. And from the extraction, you are now sending it into a database called the JET Staging Database. So you'd expect from the JET Data Manager to the JET Staging Database, this is where now we have the extraction and the transformation. So you'll be able to select the necessary data that you need for your project. You're able to do any kind of transformation that is necessary to your data for your project. And after you bring it into your JET Staging database, right, you now move to what is called the data warehousing. So you're moving along now to the transformation and loading phase, because you're now creating your data warehouse, which forms the basis of your various cubes. And it is the cubes that will be used as a data sources for tools such as your Power BI, your Excel or Excel Online, or even there's an add-in that is supplied by JET, which is able to give graphical reports. So once you have your databases, and then you go through the JET Data Manager to bring those databases together to extract the data, which is the E of our ETL, you then move or carry that data to the JET Staging Database. And it is at the JET Staging Database and the JET Data Warehouse that you now have the transforming activities. And from the JET Data Warehouse to the cubes, you now have the loading of the data into cubes for use. So in doing all of this, what you will have finally would be wonderful dashboards like what you're seeing here, where the various visuals, whether the pie charts, the bar charts, time series graphs, etc., are now able to link with those cubes and those dimensions. So the dimensions provide the various analysis perspectives, good, and the cubes also would have measures, where a measure is the aggregation or the aggregated data. And I use the word aggregated deliberately, because you may remember that aggregation not only just means addition, aggregation also means division, square root, standard deviation, etc. as long as you're able to do some form of mathematical computation on a set of values, that really is what is termed as aggregation. So with that being said, we're going to jump back again into our JET analytics. And this is where we'll be concentrating on in today's session. Today's session will be about identifying the various databases and using the JET Data Manager. And in using the JET Data Manager to connect to the various databases, can we therefore achieve our first step, which is the extraction of the data, so that we can extract and bring that data into our staging database. Good. So that being said, we're going to dive right in. All right, beautiful. Now I'm here in my virtual environment. Now I just want to get another confirmation. Can I just get a confirmation that you're seeing my virtual environment? Can I just get a quick confirmation if you're able to see my virtual environment? Are you able to still see the screen?
Yes, Steve. Yeah.
Beautiful, thanks.
Okay.
So here we have on our desktop the JET Data Manager. Remember that PowerPoint slide where I showed that it's a JET Data Manager that brings everything together. So I'm here and I've opened the JET Data Manager. So let's look here. The JET Data Manager has what is called a Solution Explorer. So with the JET Data Manager, as you may remember from last week's presentation, JET provides you with some standard projects that you're able to download from the Cube Store. And I demonstrated that last week, where you just hit Cube Store. And once you open the Cube Store, based on your license, you'll see a list of projects that your license allows you to download. JET also does continuous improvement on their products. And because of the continuous improvement, you are able to come to the Cube Store and actually update your projects, because JET is always listening to the voice of the customer. So therefore, the customer might want certain additional reports or additional fields or measures or cubes, etc. So it is always good to stay abreast with the version release that's in the Cube Store. So we opened, as you may remember from last session, a project. And when you open the project opens in what is called a Solution Explorer. So in the Solution Explorer, the most top level name is actually the name of your project. And then under your folder are all the various nodes which represent the different layers of ETL. Remember, we said, always remember, ETL, extraction, transformation, load. So the first node that I want us to look at is really the business unit. So what does a business unit represent? The business unit represents the collection of objects. Good. They represent the collection of objects that relate to data sourcing, and data extraction. So if I should probably, let me just go back to the PowerPoint slide here. Good. You'll notice that we have here the JET staging database. So it is the business unit that manages from the JET Data Manager your connectivity between your various data sources and what is called your staging database. So it is the business unit that will bring in this data into a JET-related database so that you can do all your extraction and your transformation. So going back, if I should open this business unit, which was called business unit, you'll notice the business unit node now opens. So underneath the business unit are two key nodes. This first node with this icon, good, gives us what is called the staging database information. But this second node gives us the data source. So if whether you're using the JET project, standard project, as we're using here for GP, and by the way, even though I'm using GP, the concepts are the same for GP, NAV, LS Retail, Business Central, AX, they're all the same. The concepts are all the same. So under the business unit node, I'm able to go to the data sources. And what we will see here is that two data sources have already been set up for us in this project. So if I should open the GP node, what I'm actually seeing here is all the GP related data tables that have already been selected for the project by JET. So you have the ability to either add new tables, delete tables if you think they're unnecessary, add fields, or not delete fields, or rather to delete fields. So, but let us get a better understanding. This node, which is called GP, if I should highlight it, then right click, you'll notice that there is an icon which says Edit Dynamics GP Adapter. If I should click Edit the GP Adapter, I'm seeing all the credential related information that will allow me to connect to my data source. So whenever you download a project from JET, remember JET does not have any knowledge of your environment. So one of the first things that you have to do when you download the project is that you have to edit the data source if you are using what is called the data adapter. So in my environment, GP, which was already previously defined, I now give additional information as to the server name and how I'm connecting to the database and the level of authentication. So for me, I'm going to be connecting to a database called TWO. So if I should list here, you'll see a drop down of all the databases. Good. And how do I know that? Well, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open SQL Server Management Studio, which is a tool that comes with Microsoft SQL database. And this tool is used to manage your database environment. So let me see so that we can confirm. So here I am, I'm looking on my own environment using the SQL Server Management Studio and looking at my databases. And here you will see the list of my databases, starting with AdventureWorks 2016, AdventureWorks, Data Warehouse 2016, etc. So if you just take a little picture in your mind's eye, you'll notice that this list that I see for my databases in SQL Server Management Studio is the same list that I see here. Good, here it is, AdventureWorks, etc. So this shows I'm connecting to my database environment using the Windows authentication. And once I select my database, I can now go and test my connection. Here it is, I'm now connected. Now, once you're connected to your database, right, what the system does automatically, it opens a pane on the right-hand side, which is called the data selection pane. So this would be a list of all my data tables within my database. The database which I had selected, let me go back again, is a database called TWO. All right. So let's look at my data selection. In my data selection panel, once the connection to your data source has been established, you'll get a listing on the right-hand side based on your credentials, etc., of all the tables which are available to you. So you may remember in the PowerPoint slides when we spoke about ETL, extraction, transformation, and loading, one of the extraction processes is your ability to only select the tables which you need for your project. So this is highlighted in the data selection panel. So you will see here that what is only selected, for example, GL00102, you'll see an arrow there. Good. You are able to select the tables that you need for your project. But it even goes a bit further. I could, if I wish, highlight or expand the node that represents the table and go a little bit further and only select the fields which are necessary. So hence, you'll notice we're building on the rules of business intelligence and data warehousing, where during the extraction phase of ETL, you only select the tables and fields which are necessary for your project. So if I may choose another table, let me go to probably one which is a POP, which is a purchase order processing table for those of you who are familiar with GP. So here it is, the purchase order processing table is also selected, but from that table, you'll notice of all the fields which are available, good, sorry, of all the fields which are available for this project, we only need the tables which are highlighted. So it prevents you from having to include in your project fields which are not necessary. So I'm going to show you this now. I'm going back to our POP 10100 table. Every time when you select a table, it becomes listed here under our data source. So if I should look under the data source for our P0P10100 table and now expand it, you'll notice that the only thing that is listed under the data source would be those fields which were selected from our data selection panel. So if I should uncheck the buyer ID, so I'm just going to uncheck it. Oops, I don't want to unselect it. Let me choose another one because that's a key field. Okay, document date. So here you notice document date is also listed as a selected field. So if I unselect it, all right, this is also telling me I have a mapping. I need to see if I can. Oh, looks like all of my fields are important. I was probably just trying to see if I could find a field that I can use. Okay, for this table, what this is telling me is that for all the tables which have been selected, all the fields which have been selected in the table, they are necessary inside here. So instead of deleting, maybe I should add. So what I will do is I will add a field called address one. Good. You'll notice by me checking the address one field, it now is listed here at the bottom of the list, address one. It therefore means that address one is now usable in the project. So you are able to use a selection criteria because the extraction process of the ETL allows you to determine what records are selected. So for example, I could right click and most of the menus are actually available by you just right clicking a table, right clicking a node, or even right clicking a field. So here it is for the POP 10100 table. If I right click, you'll notice that there's a filter icon and an option which says add data selection rules. So what this is saying is that I may not necessarily want all the data from the P0P 10100 table. So there might be something in my data that I might not need. So one of the things you can do to help you in your data selection, let's look at this, P0P 0100. If I should click, right click and click preview, I get a visual representation of all the data that is currently in the underlying database. So as part of my extraction, that is the E from my ETL, I might visually want to look at my data and I might want to determine which fields I may or I may not need. It might be that I might want to just look at the purchase order type being the number one rather than number two. So I'm able to do different types of filtering. Maybe I want to, for whatever reason, only look at purchase orders greater than 1,000. So you're able to look at your data and determine what fields do I need. So if I never needed the purchase order number, I could easily uncheck the PO number. But if I needed to probably apply a filter and to say, for instance, for my purchase order number, I want them to be greater than P0 1000. So I could now right click the field, the table rather, and then I say I'm going to add a data selection rule. So I left click, add data selection rule, and you'll notice that my pane now moves from data panel to now data selection rules. So I'm now able to apply some kind of data selection criteria to one field or many fields as I extract my data from my data source or my underlying database tables. So I could now probably search, and I believe we had said we would look at PO type. Was it the PO type? No, the PO number. Good. So in highlighting the field PO number, I'm now going to create a selection rule, and I'm going to say, when I'm using my selection rules, I now click on the drop-down list beside operator. So here are the various operators that you're able to use in creating your selection criteria rule. So you could either say whether the purchase order is empty or not empty, or equal or not equal, or greater than. So there's so much that you can use. So I remember we had said we want purchase orders which are greater than P0 1000. So I could select greater than. So it enters the selection greater than in the operator, and then I click in the value, and I'm able to add my value. Now look what happens when I click add. You'll notice two things now happen. In my data selection rule, it now gives you a filter icon. So I'm now saying that as I'm selecting from this table, which is the POP 10100, which has to do with purchase orders, my project, as I select my data, has a filter. And my filter is that for my purchase order numbers must be greater than P0 1000. So I just use this as an example to show you that this is one of the methodologies that you can use to apply what is called your ETL, extraction, transformation, and loading, but more specifically, the extraction. So what this does at this point, when I run my project, it will search my data tables in my underlying data source and ensures that I only select purchase orders which are greater than PO 1000. Now, it might be that I want to do a particular project where all purchase orders below 10,000, no, that's 1,000, I do not necessarily need. So it just depends on just what your project is all about. So this is what is called a selection criteria. Now, there's something else that you should note, because we don't necessarily need this selection criteria, so I'm going to delete it afterwards, but there's something I want you to note. You remember we said that the business unit is the collection of nodes relating to your staging database and your data sources. If I should open the staging database, I'm actually seeing the list of tables that I've selected. So every time when I make an adjustment to my data source, it is automatically reflected in my staging database area. But as I scroll through this list, there's something interesting that we notice. We'll notice that the words GP, DBO, POP 10100 is in red, while every other table is colored in black. So what does the red signify? Whenever a table or a field is listed in red, it's an indication to you that the data source was somehow modified, whether a selection criteria was added or removed, or whether a field was added to the table or removed. Once you make any adjustment to any of your selected tables, good, in your data selection panel, it will automatically be shown here. So what does the red mean? The red means that you have to run an update of your project because some underlying factor has been changed. Either a selection criteria has been changed, some filter has been changed, or some additional table was added or a field was added. So don't worry when you see the red. The red just simply means, listen, be careful because your underlying data might have changed. So as you select your data sources through your data selection panel, it automatically updates your data sources area based on what has been selected. And as you make adjustments in your data sources, it automatically makes the adjustment into what is called your staging database. So what is the staging database? The staging database is the data that has been extracted from your various data sources and now brought into your project. In other words, the letter E, the extraction from your ETL. Good. So if I should go just a little bit technical, you'll notice that the name of this business unit is called JetGP Stage. So in order for you to get a good understanding, I'm going to go back to SQL Server Management Studio. You'll notice that among my list of databases, there's a database here called JetGP Stage. So an understanding of this diagram will give you a better understanding of how Jet really works. You may remember last week when I said that you don't have to worry whenever you use Jet Analytics to pull data from your underlying databases. Jet does not write to your production database. Jet does not write to any of your source databases. It only pulls data. Excuse me. So the next question is, for the data that is pulled or is extracted, where is it saved? Is it saved in the original databases? And the answer is no. Good. Whenever the Jet Data Manager through the data source pulls your data based on your data selection from your GP tables, your D365 Business Central tables, your LS Retail tables, your various SQL or other environmental tables, it pulls that data and saves it in its own repository. And the name of that repository is JetGP Stage. And why the name JetGP Stage? Because in the project, that repository was given the name JetGP Stage. So if you had called the name of that database, My KFC Company, then if you were to go into SQL Server, you would actually see the name of the database called My KFC Company. Good. So that is the purpose of this database, as named here, called the JetGP Staging Database. This is a database, therefore, whenever the project is run or updated, all the data that would have been extracted from your underlying data tables and fields, as well as your environmental and other data sources, are pulled and extracted and placed into the repository, the database repository of Jet Analytics. And in this case, this database is called JetGP Stage. Good. So with you having a good understanding of that, you can now feel more comfortable knowing that when you now bring in data, because you can bring in data and make changes out to the data. If maybe a field has a value of 1, you can add 100 to it. And you might be saying, my gosh, in me adding all of this and doing all of these divisions and creating these fields, is it corrupting my original data source? And the answer is no, because all of that extraction and the transformation that you're doing is actually done in Jet's own database, the data that it would have extracted from your data source and now done the necessary modifications to your data. So with that in place, let's look back again. So we said under the business unit, which is a collection of the objects that relate to your data sources and your staging database. This project, which was supplied to you automatically by Jet, if you wanted to add another data source, you can actually do that by just right-clicking the data sources. And when you right-click the data source node, you have 2 context-sensitive help menus. one which is called data source and one which is called the adapter data source. As we said last week, the adapter data source is really pre-built record pointers, pre-built scripts, etc., which automatically pull the necessary tables that you would need from a Dynamics Nav application, or one which is AX related, which is D365 for business and operations, for operations and finance rather, CRM, GP, etc. However, if you wanted to use another data source, you could add now other ODBC compliant databases, or maybe SQL Server. So you have many other databases that you can add to your project. And it goes through all the properties where you just connect. And once you provide the necessary information to connect to your databases, you'll bring them in. So the key thing to take to note as our takeaway here is that once you now add all your data to the data source, good. JET also modifies your staging database, which I showed you was its own repository. Good. So now the question is, as we're looking through this list, you'll notice that there are some lists, there are some nodes which are yellow in color, and there are some nodes which are purple in color, and there are some nodes which are just a plain grid, black and white in color. So you may ask, what is the difference between these three? And the answer is simple. All data that is coming, and let me just compress this. All data in your tables under your staging database node that are just black and white in color, these represent tables that can be found under your data source. So let me do it by way of an example. If I should scroll, you'll notice that, let me choose one. One of the tables, which is strictly just black and white grid, it says here GL00102. So this table, GL00102, because it's gray in color, it means that that table is coming from the actual data source. And here it is, GL00102. So if we now know what are the tables in black and white, the question now is, what are these tables in purple? The tables in purple represent now tables that you design within the JET Data Manager, which do not come from an underlying data source. So it is very possible that in addition to you bringing data from your production environment, your Nav, your Business Central, your GP, etc., and your other external sources, it's very possible that you might want to create your own table or tables with your own data. So the JET Data Manager gives you the ability to create your own tables. And that is one of the things we'll be demonstrating the next time we meet. And when you create your own data tables, the tables which are created by you are listed in purple. So from the account type to DBO void, these in the purple color represent tables that would have been created by you, the project developer, the JET project developer, in that you created them within the JET Data Manager and not within, and not coming from an external data source like your D365 environment, etc. And then finally, your date, or what is in yellow, are date-related tables. If I just right click tables, you'll notice here that the various type of tables, they have the colored icons beside them. And date tables are necessary because most of your analysis in when you look at business analytics, etc., are temporal in nature, meaning they are date related. There are some date factors. So you're able to analyze data from date-related perspectives, say for instance, hourly, minutely, weekly, specific days, monthly, yearly, by quarter, etc. So you are able to create a table with a full set of dates, and then you'll be able to apply that these dates as perspective to your data, so that you might be able to analyze data, aggregated data based on quarters, years, etc.